readers, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today we are talking about The Wolves of Winter by Tyrell Johnson. Before we get too into it, though, I just need to... The author photo here is a picture of him and his dog. And that just really hits me in the feelings. I love that. Okay, but now that we have that out of the way, let's jump into this story. So, The Wolves of Winter is a post-apocalyptic story. When we pick up at the beginning of the book, it's been 7 years since the nuclear wars broke out. Following that, there was widespread flu, and basically there's just not many people left on Earth. On the back of the book, there's a blurb that says, with elements of Cormac McCarthy's The Road and TV's The Walking Dead. And that's a pretty good description, I think. So the majority of the book takes place up here in Canada in the Yukon. And we meet a family. The main character of the book is a girl named Lynn McBride. Her full name's Gwendolyn, but she'd really prefer if you just call her Lynn. There's her mom, her brother, her uncle, and then a young man that was a family friend of the uncle, and he's with them as well. They're, like I said, up in the Yukon. It's pretty much perpetual winter at this point. And they've sort of built themselves a nice little area to live and hunt. They've made some cabins, I think 3 cabins total, and they're just kind of living their lives. Back when the wars began, they were from Chicago, and after that, they'd kind of just sort of started moving after they had to, so they went from Chicago to Alaska? Or Arizona. I'm thinking Alaska. I'll put it here. And then eventually they end up in the Yukon. This book was an exceptionally fun read, and I read it very quickly in just a couple of sittings. I couldn't put it down. Every time I did, I was just thinking about it. And that's a mark of a pretty good book to me. This isn't often a genre of book that I'd pick up. But I loved the title, The Wolves of Winter. There's something so appealing about it. And after I read the back, I was like, okay, let's try it. Let's see how it goes. It's beautifully written. There are some passages that just really, really stuck with me. This is the author's debut novel, and I can only imagine that there'll be much, much more from him in the future. I dog-eared my favorite passage. I thought I'd read it to you real quick before I get too much more into the specifics of this novel. And it's about grief. I've always found grief to be something so interesting to read about. Because it's sort of one of those universal things. We'll all be touched with grief at some points or others in our lives. And the ways that we deal with grief is such a personal thing. And in this book, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of grief because, as I mentioned, when I talk about the people who are there with Lynn, her father's not one. He died of the flu before they made the final move to the Yukon. So, she's mourning that. They're all mourning the loss of civilization as they knew it, society as it was before the wars. And there's just something really eerie in reading this book because it seems a little too possible. You're reading it, you're like, oh my lord, like, don't let that be a thing in the near future. So this passage on grief, it says, grief never goes away, it just changes. At first, it's like molten hot lava dripping from your heart and hollowing you from the inside. Over time, it settles into your bones, your skin, so that you live with it. Walk with it every day. Grief isn't the footprints in the snow, it's the empty space between. And I don't know, that hit me. That hit me really hard when I read that. So, okay, let's get into the particulars of this book. So, like I said, it's been 7 years. Lynn is now approximately in her mid-20s. I think they might have said 23. I'm not entirely sure. Mid-20s. And she's living with her family. Every day is much the same. She goes hunting. She does a lot of the hunting. Her father had taught her about hunting and fishing and all that stuff before he had died. She references a lot her mom. her mom, before the Yukon, before all of this happened, a softer version of her mom. And there's a lot of sadness in that kind of the way that we change and harden over time because of circumstances. And yeah, I found those bits really sad. So yeah, she's hunting, she's fishing. They have a nuisance of a neighbor whose name is Conrad, who kind of ended up joining them. So he's also built a cabin, but it's a little ways away from theirs. They get together in the evenings, the family and that family friend Ramsey, and they play cards. They do, as much as they can to make it feel like a normal life. And then one day, when Lynn is outside, she comes across a man, and that's pretty exciting because you don't often see other people. His name is Jax, and with him he has a dog, a husky, and his name is Wolf. And Lynn can tell that this man looks to be injured. He's got a bit of a limp, and for sure, no doubt he's hungry. So she invites him back to their cabins to feed him, look after him medically, and then, he can go on his way. Her mother is not impressed when she brings this stranger to their cabins. But eventually they all just sort of accept it, and they heal him up and they feed him, and he ends up staying with them for a little while. So as the chapters are going by, each chapter kind of begins with a flashback to a moment before the apocalypse, before it all went awry. And so through that, we get to know more about Lynn and her mom and her dad. And her dad especially, because since he's not with us, we start to see what a big role he still played. And towards the end, we find out the extent of how big that role is. So as Jax is staying with them, we start to get a feel that there's something more to him. Like, we don't know what it is, but there's something more. And we're kind of just waiting to find out and see what it all is. In the meantime, there's also a group of scientists and doctors and things, and they're kind of a Center for Disease Control outfit, but they go by the name Immunity. And we kind of find out that they're looking for Jax. We don't really know why yet, but one day a group of sort of, what you can call them, like a group of men show up, and they've got horses and a truck thing that's being pulled by the horses, and they've kind of got wares on their truck, and they're wanting to trade for them. So, they take a look and they make a few trades, and then all of a sudden Jax freaks out and kills them all except for one that managed to get away. And the family is kind of like, what the hell are you doing? And so the family ties Jax up, brings him into the cabin, and they're like, you need to talk. And he's like, no, listen, what I need to do is I need to leave. Because if I don't, those more people are going to come, and you're in danger. I'm in danger. I have to go. And they're not wanting to let him leave. And there's this one part where he's like, listen, you can either let me leave and I walk out of here, or I can kill you all and then leave. You're like, oh. And you can see them kind of wondering, like, how are you going to do that? You're tied up. And then he manages to get himself out of the ropes. And we're starting to see that he has, like, really intense physical abilities. So he leaves, and then the uncle, his name is Gerald, he's like, I'm going to go with him because I need to know that he's not, part of the immunity, and he's going to actually bring them here to us. So he goes with them. Lynn wants to go too, but they kind of shut that down. Then a few hours later, she says she's going to go out hunting, and instead she follows Jax and Gerald. And as she's trudging, a big snowstorm comes, and she ends up just kind of turned around in the snow, freezing, unable to keep going, no shelter, and she kind of lies down and she's just ready to die. And then I guess she passes out, and then when she wakes up, they've actually found her. Gerald and Jax have. So Then they sort of warm her up, try to nurse her back to health as quickly as possible, and then they keep going. After a while, they do find one of the immunities camps, and there's all kinds of kerfuffle. You know, they think they can kind of sneak up on it, but they can't, and Lynn gets taken, and that she doesn't know where Jax and Gerald are. So it's really just a fun, and I mean, fun, is that the right word? I don't know, because there's a lot of grief and sadness and hardship and cold winter, but it kept me on the edge of my seat. It kept me wondering what was going to happen. It was beautifully written. And for anyone who doesn't want any spoilers, I'm going to let you click off now because I don't want to ruin it for anyone who wants to read it. But yeah, if you love those post-apocalyptic stories, then you would probably love this. And the way it's compared to The Walking Dead on the back of the book, I find that that has a lot to do with, of course, you know, The Walking Dead at its core is a story about people trying to survive in a new world. So there's things like that. And as the seasons of The Walking Dead have gone on, the zombies aren't the threat anymore. It's the other people who have survived. So it's similar in nature to that it's the people, you know, instead of banding together to help each other rebuild, it's every man for himself. So yeah, if any of that sounds interesting to you, definitely check out The Wolves of Winter, and I will see you next time. For those of you still here, let's get back into it. So they've taken Lynn. She ends up in sort of a medical room. She's refusing to talk to anybody. You know, she's not going to give them any information. One of the other patients there ends up escaping. It's a patient who has the flu. This flu is very, very contagious. So they end up recapturing this woman and putting her in the hospital room with Lynn. And in capturing her, she's lost a lot of blood. And they're like, okay, you're going to donate the blood. They say that to Lynn. And they take her blood and they give it to this woman. And the next day they come in and the woman's been healed. She doesn't have the flu anymore. And everyone's kind of like, this is impossible. Like, how did this happen? And the scientists, you know, they look more into it and they realize that somehow Lynn's blood was what cured this woman. So of course now, if anything, that just makes her a more valuable commodity, and they definitely don't want to let her go. She's really concerned about Jax and Gerald. She's worried that they've been killed, that they've been wounded, but she's still not talking to these people. Eventually, this and that happens, and she gets the opportunity to be outside, sort of less supervised. One time she says she needs to use the washroom, and a man takes her out. And so she's talking to this man because she needs to at this point. So she asks if she can use his lantern to go into like the outhouse because there's no electricity or anything like that. And reluctantly, he gives it to her, and she goes in, and then she blows it out, and she says, oh, it's out, I can't see anything, can you please come in and help me? He's kind of like grumbling, doesn't want to do it, but he does. He goes in, she smashes him over the head with the lantern, and she leaves. And as she's leaving, she gets caught again with one of the women, like doctors or scientists, whatever they are, who had held her captive. And this woman is sort of, now that they're away from everything, she's kind of giving us the feeling that she's on the side of Lynn. And she's telling her, like, get out of here, get to Vancouver. The way your blood is, there's someone there who will be able to help you. She says this, the immunity, this team, it started off with the right intentions, but somewhere along the way, it all got messed up. So you need to go somewhere where someone who is still of good intentions to end this flu can help you, and help you distribute your blood in a way that will be able to cure a lot of people. Like, not distribute her blood, but like find out what it is that is making her blood sort of the antidote to this flu. As she's trying to leave, there's some men that are trying to stop her. As the doctor is trying to help Lynn, one of the men can see that, and he attacks the doctor. And then Lynn ends up having to kill one of the men so she can get away. And that was kind of like the first human that she'd ever killed, and that really sticks with her for quite some time. So off she goes. She meets up with Jax and Tyrell. She makes it back home, where her mother is furious because, if you'll remember, she had just been going hunting for a couple hours. It's now been days and days later, and her mom was worried sick, and so that's all that. So now they know that the immunity will definitely be coming after them, because not only now are they in hot pursuit of Jax, they're also in pursuit of Lynn. So we find out that Jax had, well, one of the reasons, I forgot to mention this, way back when we first meet him, that we start to think there's something a little off about him, is not only his superhuman strength and speed, but also, at one point, Lynn offers him a strawberry, like for dessert or for breakfast or something, and he doesn't know what it is. He's never... And she's like, what? You don't know what a strawberry is? So it's at around this time that we find out that Jax and his mother were actually sort of kidnapped back when Jax was a child, and they were raised... he was raised as part of a program where they did tests on children. And his mother died when he was very young, as many of the mothers did who were part of this program. And then Jax was kind of, tests and experiments were performed on him, and it was made so that he kind of had superhuman immunity abilities, and with that came being really fast and things of that nature. That's where the sort of superhuman strength and things like that comes from. So now they know that immunity is 100% likely to be following them, and they only have so much time. So they're trying to figure out, like, what do we do? Do we pack up and do we run? Or do we stay here and wait and then just fight them when they get here? So that's what they decide to do, because, like one of the characters say, I don't know if it's the mom or Gerald, one of them says, like, if we leave here, we'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulder. At least if we stay here and face them, we can put an end to it or be killed. One or the other. So as they're waiting, Lynn and her mom kind of have a moment together, and Lynn begins to find out more about her dad, and she finds out that he was actually one of the first scientists who had been asked to take part in the immunity. He had been working tirelessly to find a cure for the flu years and years and years before it even broke out, back when immunity was good intentions trying to do good things. And then, you know, everything kind of goes awry, and at that point is when they left Chicago, because he felt he had to disappear his family to get away from this group, or else they would come after them. So that's what he does when he moves them to Alaska. And then, well, that was as far as he got. He died of the flu in Alaska before they went to the Yukon. So she finds out that all of this, and she finds it out because she mentions to her mom how her blood seems to have curative abilities for this flu. And she says the reason that it did was because at one point, Lynn herself had gotten the flu, and her dad had sort of a serum that he had spent years and years working on, that he was pretty sure would be a cure, and he administered it to her. And she healed perfectly. But the problem was, shortly after he got sick, but he didn't have enough of it left to give to himself. So that was how she became the way that she did, where she was able to cure that woman's flu. So now we're sort of waiting. There's the build up to the battle that we know is going to come when immunity gets there, and they do, and it ensues. And there's all kinds of carnage. Luckily, there's not too many from, you know, our side that end up dead. But the one that does isn't actually killed by immunity. Even it's killed by that. He's killed by that neighbor, Conrad. Conrad knows that the immunity's here and they want Lynn and Jax, and so he wants to make a deal with them. he'll try to get them, Lynn and Jax, if they take him with them so that he can, you know, be around people and try to start a better life. But that doesn't work out, of course. And then in the cabin, Conrad attacks Lynn, and when it doesn't go as planned, he kills Ramsey and then attacks Lynn again, and it's a very unsettling scene. But aside from the family friend Ramsey, everyone else makes it through. Once we come out on the other side, Jax decides that he is going to leave. He says that he wants to go and see if there are any other camps, immunity camps out there. See if, you know, he can put a stop to any more, potentially any more that are out there. And he doesn't want to stay with them because he feels like he'll just be constantly putting them in danger. So he goes off on his own, and then Tyrell, the uncle, he's just, ever since he finds out the news that Ramsey was killed, he's never the same again. And one day he tells them that he's going to go off hunting on his own for a while. And he says, you know, it's fine, I'll be back in a few days. But they all sort of have this feeling that he's just kind of going to go on out into the woods and just whatever happens, happens. There's a bear he's tracking. And as their feeling was correct, they never see him again. Finally, Lynn decides that she needs to make the trek to Vancouver, where that doctor had told her there were people there who could help her. And she wants her mom and her brother to stay behind so that when the time comes, she has a home to come back to. It just feels like she'll be able to move quicker on her own. So off she goes. All throughout this time, too, she's been finding that before he left, she was developing feelings for Jax, and there was one point where he kissed her, so she was sad that he was gone. And then so she takes off on her own, leaving her mom and brother behind, and she actually runs into Jax. He tells her that after he had taken off on his own, he turned back because he realized he didn't want to be away from them. And when he got back to the cabins, her mom had told him what had happened, so he went off after Lynn to accompany her to Vancouver. And then that's kind of where it ends. So I find that it's sort of building up that there could be a sequel to this. Because certainly we could follow Lynn and Jax as they go to Vancouver and see what else happens. But also it's written in such a way that if there is no sequel, that's fine as well. Because it left on a fairly satisfying note. So that's cool. And that was The Wolves of Winter. Beautifully written. I enjoyed it. Easy, quick read. And yeah, there you go, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Before I go, I'll give a quick shout out here because it's Friday on my channel and that's just what we do. Alright, today's shout out goes to Bargains, Beauty, and More. This is Tracy. If you guys love makeup videos, she does BoxyCharm unboxings, all different kinds of makeup videos. Get readies with me. She does car vlogs as well. Definitely check her out. She's a sweetheart. And if you do, please let her know that I sent you. See you tomorrow, guys. Bye.